a lot of the book reviews of Gay Bar are like sometimes somewhere between like 10 to 40% like the author's own experiences, because it kind of invites that. And that made me really glad that it felt like the fact that getting back to that idea of being really, really specific about your own experiences means that it kind of maybe probably does a better job at communicating, I don't know, like opening up a conversation about what other people's very specific experiences are, rather than trying to speak on behalf of everybody. I mean, the why we went out is a bit of a red herring, really, in the title. The fact that I say we, I'm obviously not trying to speak for like the gay populace.
Hi, everyone. Just a quick note to let you all know that we are reading Paul Tremblay's novel Horror Movie for our October book club, and in this case, our Halloween book club. So on October 27th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be meeting and discussing, and it's free, virtual. Everyone loves coming to chat. There's different ages. My parents join sometimes. It's such an exciting group. We all love literature and it's such a creative environment. So please spread the word, especially if you have horror literature friends and family, and email me ivorytowerboilerroom@gmail.com to reserve your spot. Were you a fan of the TCM Turner Classic Movie Network and you couldn't wait to see what classic movie they were going to premiere? And when you went to Hollywood/MGM studios in Disney World, you would always go to the Great Movie Ride. I absolutely loved the Great Movie Ride, especially when we landed in the Wizard of Oz scene and the Wicked Witch of the West came out from a heap of smoke and confronted Dorothy and Glinda. Well, I have a podcast for you. My good friend Christian Garcia's podcast is called That Old Gay Classic Cinema. So he combines classic cinema analysis with a queer study angle. So some of his recent episodes include Singing in the Rain, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Sunset Boulevard with our good friend Janine Cucci, the co-owner of the Soapbox NY. Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train, The Philadelphia Story, and so much more. You can listen to his podcast wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. And every Friday, I release a new That Old Gay Classic Cinema episode because he is now part of the ITBR network. I am now releasing his episodes on the ITBR podcast. So make sure that you have a listen because I was on his first episode talking all things The Sound of Music, which, if you didn't know, I was Captain Von Trapp when I was in high school. So make sure you follow him on TikTok and Instagram at That Old Gay Classic Cinema and rate, subscribe, do all the things, and please help support my friend Christian's podcast. I know you're going to love it. I know if you are a college educator listening right now, or a student, or someone who just really enjoys and values academic writing and academic topics, I have a press that you need to know about. It's called Broadview Press, and it's an independent press. I've had a few of their writers on the podcast, including Dr. Sid Dobrin, who was recently on the podcast to talk about how artificial intelligence is changing the game for humanities education. Soon, I'm going to have Dr. Andrea Sullivan Clark on to talk all about philosophies on Turtle Island, especially indigenous philosophies. And what does she think about how pop culture looks at Native American narratives? If you are looking for a text to assign your students in the humanities classroom, Broadview Press has you covered. They have a book that just came out called Academic Writing Now, a brief guide for busy students. It is designed to cover the basics of a college writing course in a concise, student-friendly format. Each chapter concentrates on a crucial element of composing an academic essay. It is available as an ebook for under $30, and it includes readings on contemporary issues like AI, climate change, and campus life. I'm so excited because Broadview Press has released an exclusive discount code, Ivory Tower, for 20% off your broadviewpress.com order. That's Ivory Tower for 20% off. Make sure you follow them on Instagram at Broadview Press. Enjoy all of your reading. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Again, delivering another Pride Month adjacent. It might not still be Pride Month, but I don't know. I'm considering the whole summer Pride Month, just because I think we need a lot of that positivity. So I'm really excited to be joined by an author who I've messaged him a lot over Instagram. He does something that I really love, which is he combines like academic queer insight with the memoir. So we'll get into that genre. I don't want to spoil it all right now, but I'm actually joined with Jeremey Atherton Lynn, the author of Gay Bar, Why We Went Out. And just to introduce you to Jeremey, he was raised in California. We were talking a lot about California. He lives in the UK and he studied writing at the Royal College of Art. His work has been published in the White Review, Tinted Window, and the Times Literary Supplement. He has won multiple awards. He's an editor at Failed States, a journal of art and writing on place. Okay, I think I covered it, Jeremey. So without further ado, here is Jeremey. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Andrew.
So for everyone out there, definitely I love that on the cover of Gay Bar, first, you have such a lovely art piece. Like, can you explain this photograph of the two, I'm assuming, male identified models?
That photographer is in Spain, or is he in France? He's in Europe. And he's a relatively new photographer who I think somebody just found his work online, and he takes really great sweaty pictures of like queer club environments. But yeah, I was happy with it. I like the anonymity because I think it kind of the fact that you can't see their faces kind of goes to show it speaks to some themes that run throughout the book about what it is to kind of lose your sense of self or want to lose your sense of self in nightlife environments. But also I also like that it's kind of ambiguous in terms of the fact that, I mean, I'm mixed race, and it's really hard, actually really hard to find photographs that portray, I don't know, it's nice that you can kind of project the characters in the book onto that or not.
Yeah. Well, and for everyone out there,
you get a lot of pictures of white dudes.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely we're gonna talk about the race politics with the gay culture that you address. Just for everyone who's listening, I mean, I'm sure when they tune into an episode called Gay Bar, you all know that if you have children in the room, this is going to be a very, explicit discussion about sex, as it should be, because Jeremey, you break so many boundaries that I think are important. So
yeah.
Jeremey's wearing his infamous baseball hat. And the only reason I say infamous is because you right away kind of show us your sexual body. And I thought that was a really interesting entryway into studying the Gay Bar. So like, maybe let's start there. Why
Sure.
did you know, okay, I need to like open up my own sexual history?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I mean, it's interesting that you say that, like, you could walk into a room and a podcast could be playing about gay bars, so you could kind of intuit that it would potentially have like explicit sexual content, because in another way, in this day and age, that might not be the case at all. There might be a conversation around sort of queer spaces that kind of remove sexuality and really focus on affirmation that's based more on sort of cultural identity. So I think that is something that I was kind of charging that first paragraph, chapter, and then subsequent passages throughout, that I wanted to be sure that it was a sex space, that a sex-driven space, and it's played up a little bit provocatively on purpose. This kind of the lines that come into the book, the subtitles, we go, why we went out, and there's these lines in the book like, we go out to get some, and things like that, which are kind of a provocation, because in the next paragraph I might say that we go out for another reason, which is to like let off steam or whatever like that. But I think I definitely wanted to make sure that that was it comes, I think one of the places where it sort of one of the sites it sort of crystallizes in a way is the Twin Peaks Tavern in San Francisco, which I hope you'll go to when you get to San Francisco. But they are the kind of the biggest, the first, known to be the first bar that had large plate glass windows, and because of that, the owners were very circumspect about what that they're actually quite rulesy with their clients, and didn't want them kind of manhandling each other and kissing even, and in view of the window. So yeah, I kind of quote, I think it is David Halpern there, about this kind of desexualization of queer culture in order to kind of put forward a kind of a more wholesome image, which may be conducive to civil rights, and it can and has been, but maybe also kind of creates an anodyne, takes away the the naughty thrill.
Yeah, well, and I know there's been a lot written by queer scholars recently about like that their sex has been taken out of queer studies, or sex is taken out of anything. Like you're saying, there's almost that trying to present anything that has to do, like you said, with the gay bar, that it's a place just like any other place, like that assimilation narrative. So I think it's really important that you're breaking, I don't want to keep saying breaking boundaries, but like you're going against the grain, I'll say it that way, in current respectability politics of, okay, well, I'm going to go against this heteronormative energy.
Is that a saying, respectability politics, or did you just make
no, I've heard that before in activist circles.
Okay, well, I'll use that, because it does kind of sum up. I understand what that's representing, but yeah, I think but these kinds of things also, it's sort of like you follow your intuition, right? And you follow your instinct to kind of like show a side of yourself that you think maybe, if you're willing to. I mean, I just recently interviewed the comedian Mae Martin. They're a stand-up comic, and they have a great show on Netflix called Feel Good. And I was reviewing, highly recommended. And I was watching, there's one of their stand-ups, they have a bit where they talk about the fact that if you reveal something about you that you kind of worry is like the kind of weird thing, it winds up being something that other people relate to. And so maybe that kind of comes from that sort of instinct. And also just like, I'm not really a contrarian by nature, I don't think, politically or anything, or so like sort of in social encounters or whatever, but I do always try to look at everything from a bunch of different angles.
Yeah, well, and I really loved that we get this image of you on your knees, like in some kind of glory hole situation, right? Like I brought up the baseball hat because like you have this moment where you have to turn it around to like, get that. I'm trying to I'll just go there because I'm bringing it up anyway. But I love how I'm trying to like say this in the most academic way, but you want to have the best like blowjob experience. And I can understand, like when I went to my first gay bars and I was like right in college, and it was college night, and you didn't have to be 21. And I was at Woody's in Philadelphia.
Hmm.
That there was exciting moments where like two guys were kissing and like, you know, had me come over, and they were like trying to get my attention by making out, because
Hmm.
I found out they were like roommates at UPenn, and it was
Hmm.
very scandalous. But because I think that, they were really open-minded with this group
Hmm.
sexual dynamic, and it was thrilling. It was exciting. I made out with them. And I think all of that is part of why we go to a
Hmm.
gay bar, right? Like I first went to really just be around the community of
Hmm.
men who identified as gay, and to feel that I could be like physical with them in
Yeah.
a space that
Yeah.
was, you know, as comfortable as possible. But we know there's not
Mhm.
always consent in those spaces. But
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I know I offered a lot with my own experience.
No, no, and I think, I mean, that's the thing. Well, first of all, you're not alone. Like, I think, a lot of the book reviews of gay bar are like sometimes somewhere between like 10 to 40% like the author's own experiences, because it kind of invites that. And that made me really glad that it felt like the fact that getting back to that idea of being really, really specific about your own experiences means that it kind of maybe probably does a better job at communicating. I don't know, like opening up a conversation about what other people's very specific experiences are, rather than trying to speak on behalf of everybody. I mean, the why we went out is a bit of a red herring, really, in the title. The fact that I say we, I'm obviously not trying to speak for like the gay populace, but where were we at? Oh yeah, well, in terms of first going out, I mean, I think one thing that like, I mean, I sort of suggest it in the book and have articulated since, is that like another thing that people don't necessarily speak about so much, is that I was taken out, and I wasn't like, I didn't kind of like sort of hatch a plan to find the one gay bar in town and get myself there. And there's this narrative that you hear a lot, especially from generations, the generation and above before me. This one spot in town, and it's kind of shady and unmarked, and you go and nervously circle the block and don't go in, but the next night you do, and then everything changes, and the drag queen brings you on stage and you make out with the handsome bartender, and you're a gay now, and that kind of like, I didn't really seek that out. I was taken along and kind of like pushed into these environments because I was sort of identified. And I think that's one of the things that I guess it kind of overlaps with what we're talking about respectability, um, is this idea of a kind of self-determination that at a certain point, I mean, obviously we need to respect each other's self-determination in terms of the fact that how we establish our place in the world, and respecting what a person's self-identity is. But there's something else that happens as well that we can't control, which is how we're seen.
Mhm.
And sometimes there can be something there can be something illuminating about the way that we're seen. And I think I was sort of seen as sort of, like people are like, this is a gay boy, let's get him over to like these clubs that we went to, Studio One in the book, in the LA chapter. And then obviously be horrible to him and get into all kinds of gossip and cat fights and backstabbing and all that kind of horrible stuff that happens. But I think that's important to me, that idea, in a way that sort of like I think where I was going with this is it cycles back to that first chapter, where it's much later, decades later, and I'm still going out and hanging out in bars and whatever. But like, there's a sort of passivity
Yeah.
that I will enter into this kind of street, like enter into the bar, especially this, like, because it's a cruise bar. And so it's like, has like a dark room or back room setup. And I enter into that with a kind of deliberate passivity to continue to be read by other people, and see where that takes me, sort of sexually, I suppose.
This is so interesting because, wow, this is like the Jeremey psychology session that I didn't expect, which is you know, and you present this in your book, which I love, is really thinking about why like the gay bar becomes this focal point for you know, gay men and you know, but I also had first gone to the gay bars of Philly
Hmm.
to dance, and it was about dancing. It was about
Oh, for
being with
sure.
my friend who she had just come out as a lesbian, and we went together, and then I think we brought like one of our ally friends who wanted to join along, who was my neighbor. So it became this whole um suburban group of like those who had come out, and we went and danced. And you know, I love though that group dynamic because it's interesting. Like I realized I really didn't start going, I didn't really go by myself ever to a gay bar
No.
until I actually went to London in 2019. And I was like, you know what? Why don't I just like hang out at this bar? And I don't even know if it was a gay bar, but it was in Soho. And,
Yeah.
you know, and I was like just reading, and eventually I did like chat with a guy near me. But I think I was always very nervous
Oh, for sure.
to go by myself because of that vulnerability you're talking about.
For sure, and that's so interesting. I mean, you know, you're younger than I am, and we didn't use the word ally. The people in the book who there are characters in the book who are like what you might call an ally now, who are, and they were like, you know, like my gal pals that I was going to these places with, and they were like not there to support me. They were like there to boss me around. I mean, they were there to support me, but they were there to like shove me into the world. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I
so
don't
they were
think it.
like trying to get you in those situations with men,
Oh,
like,
for
hey,
sure, for
kiss
sure.
this guy. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
you got to get laid. You got to meet my friend, so and so and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. I also wonder how much of that is like a fetish for the women, but we could, I'm sure there's been studies done about, you know, straight women and like, you know, if they do enjoy, not all straight women, but like, I'm
Yeah.
sure there is a type of titillation when they're taking their friend out to a gay bar.
Oh, I mean, I think, I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything about this really, but just on a very personal level, anecdotally, um, I know that. I mean, I remember one of the character, you know, she's now sort of become a character in the book, who sort of was encouraging me to go out. I remember at one point in time, which isn't in the book, her saying something to me like, "Oh, well, you know, gay men when they're together, they're sexuality is so charged because you have two male sexual drives." You know, that this was her point of view. You
Huh.
know, you have all this testosterone basically raging, and we were sort of whatever we were, 17, 18 years old, especially so then. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know about the word fetish, but I mean, I think probably there was a sort of cross identification that would involve the I mean, this is, you know, a while ago. This is early 90s now, so that there was a kind of a very well like commonly accepted cultural construct that women didn't really have a kind of like overt sexual, you know, sexuality really. I mean, it would you know, it was like the whole thing was, I mean, I remember growing up and just being kind of like women were objectified. They weren't like sort of looking. And so I think where I'm getting at, and this is really just in a personal anecdotal way in terms of these kinds of like friends that I was making, is that I think that they were maybe finding a way to learn how to express themselves, find this common ground of being kind of like overtly and joyfully sex forward, yeah, through making these connections.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you know, I've been to like you, and what I love in the book is you take us like each chapter is oriented around a certain gay bar. And like
Mm,
we get the photo of the bar,
mm,
we get your personal experience, right? Like that's the ultimate impetus always is like what was Jeremy's
mhm.
feeling when he went to this bar? And like that sparks this whole historical journey of
Indeed,
how the
yeah.
bar is situated in the city. And I just love how you orient. So like what really drew you to like knowing, okay, I'm going to center each section on a bar? After Pride Month is over, sometimes it can be hard to find our favorite LGBTQ books, TV shows, films, even theater experiences. Well, don't worry because I have the magazine for you. It is called The Gay and Lesbian Review, and their latest July and August issue just got released. It's called Sanctuary. Well, here is what editor Richard Snyder Jr. just described about the latest issue. He writes, the impulse for any minority to seek out safe spaces or sanctuaries exists in proportion to the oppression they suffer in their social world. From the catacombs of Rome to the colony of Plymouth, the upshot of this quest is well attested. Members of sexual minorities have undoubtedly been forming their own private communities for centuries. Would Plato's Symposium be an early example? But it was only in the 19th century that sexual identity became a criterion for forming associations of like minded individuals. Well, this issue has everything. An article about Andy Warhol's factory, an article about how Nantucket became a gay haven, how a lesbian art colony formed in St. Augustine, even how a gay bar in San Antonio fought back and won for recognition of the LGBTQ community. So, the ITBR is so excited to partner with the Gay and Lesbian Review, who is offering an exclusive discount code. Head on over to glreview.org, click subscribe, and enter the promo code ITBR50, that is ITBR50, to receive 50% off any print or digital subscription. And make sure you follow at the GL Review on Instagram to see all of their latest news. I hope you enjoy your reading.
Yeah. I mean, it was structured. It definitely was just, I mean, I suppose when I mean, just to give like the kind of basic precis, like, in that around the time that the book was being conceived, so many bars were closing. It was before lockdown, so they were closing just because of various other reasons, right? Such as assimilation, which we mentioned before, and real estate development, and in the UK, because it was so rampant, and because the UK media is sort of like really concentrated. It's a small island, so it was a media topic, and it kind of had this like one resolved narrative about it in a way, which is like, isn't this a shame,
Hmm.
and I felt like, well, what a strange thing to experience. Like I was speaking about before, sort of how we're identified, sometimes even before we learn how to self-identify, or alongside, and continuing to be alongside it. What a strange thing to have um, these symbols in the streets that are meant to kind of encapsulate or locate a cultural identity disappearing. And so the questions about that for me were always sort of essayistic, and they were always kind of memoiristic in terms of the fact, like, well, what is the significance of this, observing this, and not necessarily just taking the kind of uh, narrative that seemed to be kind of becoming a consensus narrative around it, but actually looking at placing myself in it. And yeah, I mean, of course I could have, like, it crossed my mind, like, okay, I could sell this book by like going to the oldest gay bar, extant gay bar in Europe, which is in Copenhagen, or going to the Stonewall Inn or something like that, and having these kind of like, there's another version of this book where they were like more landmark bars, whereas I was like, because I'm a writer from experience, I knew the only way I was going to be able to do it, to bring the kind of life that I bring to my writing, was to do it through the memories of the places that I had been to. And I think a part of me was sort of like willfully choosing these sort of like bars that seem maybe a little bit banal or ordinary, or not spectacular in a way. They're kind of like there's similar versions in other towns that are like not world famous. But the astonishing thing when you say that there's this kind of history that unravels, I sort of use the word palimpsest a lot in terms of the fact that like before my time there, I figure out like, oh, well, here in the 70s, it had this heyday, or
Hmm.
also like a series of problematic incidences, a lot of like violence and aggression and exclusion and all sorts of bad stuff. Yeah, I mean, I would scratch the surface of these bars, obviously the bars that made it into the book that were kind of ordinary to me, but then realized that they had a phenomenal history of their own and really unique journeys each of the places.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. You could have done like the landmark gay bars would have been such, and it's something that can be done, but it wouldn't come from your organic experience, like knowing intimately the place.
Sure.
I mean, or even, right, like you could have tried to like do the scandal, like the scandalized version, which would be, okay, we're going to choose the Eagle in Manhattan because it's a leather bar. And
Yeah.
I've heard tall tales about it. But
Yeah.
again,
Sure.
I mean, I've been to the Eagle, but it was with my ex-boyfriend. So I really didn't get we were propositioned by some men, but my ex-boyfriend, I realized at that moment that I was a little more curious about opening it up than he was. And well, maybe that's why we're not together now.
Okay. Yeah, sure. It's about
Yeah.
being sort of, I guess, what you might call a participant observer, or and also kind of like a wallflower participant. And I think, yeah, I mean, yeah, you hit the nail on the head in terms of the word curiosity. Like that, you were curious in the Eagle, and I was curious in these spaces. But just even as a drive of my writer, that's just like what, that's probably a good word to describe the motivating impulse.
Yeah. And I think when you're dating someone, um, and you go to these spaces, like there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be so much erotic energy and it's
Mm-hmm.
charged. And I like now realize that a conversation has to be had before going to a space with a partner because, you know, some interaction might happen and one person might be in favor of what happens and the others against it. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a recipe for disaster if you don't talk through it. It wasn't that dramatic, the actual act, but like looking back, all the pieces start to fit. But talking about, gay just identified, like you brought up symbolism. So like even I'm so close to Fire Island. I've been to the Pines and Cherry Grove, and we have like gay resort towns, whether it be Providencetown or New Hope. I know I'm listing all Northeast places, but
Yeah, there's the Russian River, Guerneville, and north of San Francisco, Palm
there,
Springs, and LA. Yeah,
there we go, Palm Springs, yes. So, and neighborhoods have a very specific history too, like West Hollywood, and in Philly, there's the gayborhood. Most metropolitan areas have what was the gayborhood. But like, do you find that would that have been definitely a different book if you had tried to center it around your experience with the gayborhoods or resort towns compared to using the gay bar as your entryway? Okay, hold on to that question because we'll be right back. But first, a word from our sponsor.
I think it overlaps. I mean, I think the Castro chapter and the Shoreditch chapter in East London as well. I mean, I think they're very present. I mean, I think I leave bars probably a surprisingly amount of the time in the book. I mean, I'm at home, I'm in domestic spaces and cafes and on the street and so on. So I think leaving, I can't really, I think that was a sort of a deliberate thing because you kind of can't really put into perspective what it is like to be inside of a space and until you also kind of include experiences that are outside of that space. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I read a lot about and a lot of like text from the areas that were kind of pertinent to whatever the kind of where I was where and when I was concentrating. So in East London, I would be reading a lot of like police monitoring reports and all kinds of and like local or sort of London gay press pieces from the 1980s, whereas in San Francisco, a lot of the stuff was 1970s, and I was reading like sociological reports, and then and then before that, 50s and 60s, I was reading a lot of legal opinions, a lot of court cases, which I think are really, really revealing in terms of not just whether a particular bar stays open or closed, but on a kind of existential level about what it is to be gay, or what it is to do gay. So we were talking about the Twin Peaks Tavern earlier. You could be a gay person in that bar, but you couldn't do gay things. And I think I find that really fascinating, kind of almost like philosophy of law. But yeah, in terms of the gay, I don't know, the one that I've never been to Fire Island, but I have to say I was absolutely overjoyed when I found out. You've probably already seen the movie Fire Island.
I haven't seen it yet, but I need to see it.
I was just introduced to it. I just saw the trailer recently, and I was just overjoyed that it's so focused on Asian American men, on sort of like conflicts between various levels of effeminacy and masculinity, and all this stuff, because it's not what I expected. You hear the word Fire Island and you think that you're going to get the narrative that you've been told before, the kind of
the jockey, like a jockey gay white man. Or...
yeah, I was absolutely thrilled. I was like, oh wow, this is really like, and I think, and it takes some getting used to, I think, now that we're almost like having this kind of revisionist viewpoint, for lack of a better term, of these kinds of particular narratives that is probably kind of surprising people. And I think that in a way, my book falls into that, where it's like can't hide the fact that I'm mixed race Asian American, that like whatever kind of various principles of being that I or experiences of being that I bring are like not necessarily the kind of version of like a neutral narrator that I think we subconsciously, as readers, quite widely have held, that there is some kind of like neutral voice that you expect to be writing this book. Yeah. And the other thing that is funny about this book, in a way, since it's been out in the world, is for some reason there's been like another reader. I've noticed I've had some like feedback or experienced some feedback online and stuff, where people didn't kind of see where I was coming from, and were saying like, oh, I wish there was like this involved more POC people. I've heard stuff like that, and I'm like, oh well, your narrator is POC. Some of the characters who are in the book probably I don't make necessarily mention of people's gender experiences or their racialized identities or whatever like that. And so that's been extraordinarily interesting for me to witness, that even as I am doing this sort of casual project of revision, that it's still the presumption that I probably am like a cis white straight, not straight, a cis white gay dude.
Or no, it's actually funny. I'll have to shout out my friend Scott, because Scott, I love him. He is straight, he's white, but he's the one who would always want like bring me to Fire Island, to the Pines, because he loves, well, I don't want to air too much of his business, but it's not anything like untoward. He like just loved going to a place where he could like, be comfortable in laying out in the nude and like not being judged for it. Because it's true, there aren't many beaches where like men can feel comfortable doing that, unless it's, like nude beaches, I think, have a different connotation depending on like where you are and all of that. But I always found it funny that like my introduction to Fire Island would always be from my straight friend, like wanting me to go.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
These kinds of intersections that we don't necessarily talk about. We do have. I've moved down to the south coast of England. That's kind of primarily where I am based now, and we do have a small nude beach, and there is an overlap. There's families, and then there's a lot of gay men.
yeah. Well, and you see that on Fire Island too. And I think like I'm glad that you brought up the movie, because I'm also not sure if you know him, but Jack Parlett is coming out with a whole cultural study of Fire Island, and I'm interviewing him soon.
Yeah, I blurbed the book.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, it's very his slant is very literary, so that's a very interesting take on it, I think. Yeah, it's worth a read, definitely.
Yeah. Well, and I think since you brought up the literary, and And hopefully Scott, well, I didn't say too much about Scott, so it's okay. It's all
Always
good things. It's all good things. I was gonna say I have like other Fire Island stories just about, but it's true. Like I like going to Fire Island because of that experience of the nude beach and feeling that you're not, I think a lot of people think you're going to be judged, but there's all shapes and sizes at Fire Island. But yeah, like you get to the heart of the mythos. Like how are these places popularized in culture and in film and in literature? And like you're right, for a long time there's like the gay white fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so I think I'm wearing my Whitman shirt just in honor of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if I knew you had quoted Whitman at the beginning when I first bought your book a year ago. I don't think I did. So it's funny to me how Whitman keeps coming back into these queer
Yeah.
texts that are being published. But I love how you start with one of his Calamus quotes,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the quote about a long while amid the noises of coming and going, of drinking and oath and smutty jest. There we two contend, happy in being together, speaking little, perhaps not a word. And
Mm-hmm.
I just have to ask why that specific Calamus
So
quote.
it's 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 generally agreed, I think, that he was writing about FAFs in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, I believe, which is a sort of um, what for a while somebody might call it work in, and I mentioned in my book that people call it gray bar, like it's sort of like that was a gathering spot for local men who slept with men, um, and it's not FAFS is I've mentioned FAF in an essay that I've written before, but it's not in gay bar. But it was the romance. You know what it was? It was the thing. I think originally the main epigraph of the book was a quote from Roland Barthes about the death of adjectives, which was a reference to the fact that what if there is no more gay bar, but just a bar that might have some gay people in it, and that was a kind of a more of a theoretical epigraph. What does the death of the gay bar mean? The death of gay itself. And then that Calamus quote that I put in, that I replaced it with, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the two characters seem to be very much in love, and that their love is kind of like they have sort of only eyes for each other in the center of this room, but at the same time they're very much participating in this room and do have eyes all over the rest of the room. And yeah, I think that energy was very special to me in terms of the fact that it's sort of, we get fed so many gay romance narratives, and there's really a love story at the heart of my book, and as that developed and really kind of became centralized, that's one of the reasons that epigraph was the one that sort of won. But we get so many gay narratives like Call Me by Your Name or Brokeback Mountain or even Moonlight that are really about relationships in isolation. And it's almost a kind of there's almost a kind of dismissiveness of the sort of social milieu in which some get I don't want to say dismissive, but there's almost a sort of like a neglect for that. I feel like you feel less stories about hey, maybe Fire Island's going to be a good one about which neither of us have seen yet, about romance that occurs within, for instance, a gay bar population. There's a book here called it doesn't have much presence in the States, by a British writer called Neil Bartlett, called Ready to Catch Him Should He Fall, which is a really beautiful book. And it's such a good story about a romance between a younger and older man in a bar. And like everyone in the bar is completely up in their shit. And a lot of them have slept with either one, if not both of them. And it's not only the other people who are a part of the bar, sort of queer ghosts come to visit them as well.
Wow.
So that was a really informative book in terms of the fact that I didn't want to tell it's not a story about isolation. So this is good, a long-winded answer to say that Walt Whitman is there because in those lines, that verse, he's both in love with one person and kind of in love with the rest of the room. But Walt Whitman is also present throughout the book because I think he really represents, he's sort of a proto-clone, this kind of appropriation of working men's clothes and this kind of performant masculine and working class performativity, which comes up in a couple different chapters of the book.
Yeah, well, I'm excited that you speak to Whitman's cruising dynamic. That's actually why I first connected to Jack, because he wrote about the poetics of cruising, and I'm all into this connective, like homoerotic male desire that just is pulsating. Like you've brought it from that section of Calamus called A Glimpse, but it's one poem that I love so much is called We Two Boys. And right, I'm sure you've read it, but it's about them clinging together. And there's almost this North and South Civil War illusion that's happening there. But at the end of the day, there's still two men coming together. And I love that Whitman was always interested in the connective bodies. And I love how you kind of show the other side, which is what we've seen so much with gay representation, which is isolation. So yeah, it's nice to see kind of going now more into this. Like, I hope that Fire Island, I'm excited now. We'll have to chat offline to see what we think of it. But I mean, I love Bo and Yang. So right. I'm excited. Oh, and I think Margaret Cho, isn't she in it? Yes.
Yeah. Looking forward.
And then there's a new Queer as Folk coming out too.
Yeah, I didn't see the American. I've only seen the original British Queer as Folk.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, just because I know Ryan O'Connell is in the new one. But yeah, so there's a lot coming out in the media. So I think I definitely have to bring up, I'm sure a mentor, or she has to be a major presence in your life, which is Maggie Nelson. Like, how do you know Maggie?
Oh, she's not a mentor. I mean, outside of the page, she, I actually, I think when I'm going, we'll be in Los Angeles soon, which was where my family is. I will finally get to meet her. But yeah, no, I didn't. That's just a part of the kind of the process of sending out. You mean in terms of her?
Well, yeah. So for everyone out there, Maggie Nelson, who I was first introduced to, I think a lot of readers know, The Argonauts, her auto theory memoir. Well, I guess that is auto theory, but we could talk about that. But yeah, her use of scholarly queer research, but also speaking to her memoir. And like, in my opinion, that's like what brings you two together, is you both kind of have that same auto theory, that you're speaking to the general public who are just really invested in these topics. And it doesn't have to just be a scholarly audience. So I love, that connection. But yeah, she says that Gay Bar is an absolute tour de force. I mean, is on the cover, is literally on the front page. And then she can't remember the last time she's been so happily surprised and enchanted by a book. So, I mean, very glowing. My favorite Bath and Body boutique, the Soapbox NY, has me covered. From Farmhouse Fresh, my favorite company for all things face masks and retinol creams, to Finchberry, a beautiful bar of soap that looks like a slice of cake. I especially love the emerald one because it reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. They also have a blending bar with over 200 essential oils. So Janine, the co-owner, she knows my favorite scent is French vanilla and almond. So I've had the body wash, the bubble bath, the body lotion, if you don't live on Long Island, which I don't live on Long Island anymore, I still am getting my favorite products because the Soapbox NY has an extensive website as well as an Instagram and TikTok where you can place your orders by just DMing Janine. So if you do live on Long Island, definitely make a day trip out to Port Jefferson. It's a beautiful beach town. So you can follow the Soapbox NY on Instagram and TikTok. That's at the Soapbox NY. And you'll see all ways to contact them. I hope that you enjoy all of their products as much as I do. I mean, I now have gotten all my family and friends addicted to the Soapbox NY. So if I can get more of you out there addicted to their Bath and Body Boutique, the better. Praise.
Yeah, and I mean, I think especially like it's interesting that you presumed that we knew each other, because for her to be so fulsome and kind and supportive without knowing each other made all the difference in terms of the fact that it wasn't sort of a favor. It was sort of I was really surprised and completely elated when that came in to my into my inbox, my email inbox. But I think what you're recognizing there, maybe intuiting, is a kind of communication that we do have through book, which is what we have through books. Is just that even though she and I have never met, I quoted from Rebecca Solnit recently in something that I wrote, where she says, "Books are solitudes in which we meet," and I think that in that case, it is like a sort of, in a way, it's a in a way it's a lie to say that we don't know each other because we've read each other's books, right? So even though like one writes performatively, and as I say in my book, memoir is drag, you can never really know. My voice as an author is a character, is a performance, a performative act. It has to be, because we can't show our wholeness even if we knew that wholeness. But what we do kind of hopefully generate when we put out there is that we zing back and forth some ideas and can connect and do kind of in a way know each other. So this idea of solitudes in which we meet. And I think before, Andrew, before we started recording this, we were talking about some of your gay bar experiences, and I was saying how much how common it is that that's the reaction, that people talk to me about their experiences as much as if not more than what they've read of mine in my book, which is great. It's wonderful. It's exactly what it should do, is generate a conversation, and then I'm able to continue to listen to other people's stories as well.
Yeah. And if you have just a few more minutes, is that okay, Jeremey?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Just because, yeah, I think, and that's exactly what I intuited. I love that word. So I'm going to, again, borrow from what you're saying in your language, is like what I've loved about Maggie Nelson's work is auto theory, which I know sounds jargony, but basically bringing in the personal to your observation, to your writerly voice. Like you're bringing in your personal voice to speak about what could be a very technical scholarly topic. And I love that, like, whether it be through her journey and her relationships, but her studying under Eve Sedgwick, I know, is like a big part of the Argonauts. Like you also bring in so many queer scholars, and like you mentioned David Halperin, but you bring in different studies, but it's all centered on your own subjectivity. And I just think it's a really great way of showing what can be done with scholarly knowledge to bring it to those who are so curious about, okay, well, why is Jeremey focusing on a gay bar? What does that tell us about our life and society? But like, if it's only in the university, like under paywall, they probably are not going to access those articles, or really there's a certain barrier. So like, you
Oh,
know,
for sure.
what does it mean for you to be part of this kind of memoir style of scholarship?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of myself as a scholar. So that I mean, I and um, it's funny because you sort of mentioned sort of bringing the personal voice and personal experience to a kind of a sort of scholarly inquiry. And in a way, I guess I sort of think of it as the opposite, that I'm sort of a memoirist who just happens to be interested in the world around me. So when I write about my impressions and observations, it's always going to involve like a deep dig into history, to whichever extent it seems appropriate. And I love archival research and just like all sorts of research, like I was saying earlier, reading legal opinions and things like that. Theory, yes, but I mean, it's funny. I mean, I think theory in the book almost kind of serves a sort of plays a sort of poetic role. I don't really know. I don't really I don't think it probably, I mean, I'm saying this spontaneously, but I don't think it probably is the spine or the glue of the ideas of the book. I think those come from more from events, um, kind of facts and events, as Hannah Arendt might say, or just sort of um, uh, yeah. I guess there's quite a bit of history, my personal history, of course, as well. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, bringing all that stuff together, it's sort of, I mean, there's another line in the book where I say collage is so gay, but I think it's kind of a collage in a lot of ways. And it's just sort of like, there's this Marcel Proust line where he talks about, you should quote other people because like they probably said something more interesting than you did. And I think that, I do have fun with that. Like that is like, I think when you ask like, what's it like to be, I think the question was like, what's it like to be a part of this kind of dialogue, I suppose, with other authors, or to be placed in, for me, it's just sort of like, I wouldn't want to do it if I wasn't sort of having a good time. And I really don't think it's that far away from, I make a lot of mixtapes and playlists to sort of adjacent to the book, as well as on separate sort of subject areas and sort of inquiries. And I don't think in a way it's that different from mixing music together. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it was a relief when I won the National Book Critics Circle Award recently, which was a total surprise. But I think it was ever since I was nominated, I was or announced as a finalist. I was so glad that they chose the book for the autobiography category, because as far as I'm aware, they consider books and then put them into the category where they think it belongs, as a part of the process. And it meant a lot to me that it would be seen that way, because if I'm writing from a position of personal experience, then it makes me seem like a lot less of a solipsistic person, where I'm like, well, he's writing his story, but yet look how much he brings in about, this cruising zone in the 1700s in London, and this bar in San Francisco in the 1970s. Whereas I can imagine if somebody approached the book and thought I was trying to do a cultural history of the gay bar, like we get about the cultural history of salt or any given topic, that they think, well, wait, why is he talking so much about his cap and turning it around?
Well, and I think that I'm going to definitely borrow, or I think you should coin collage theory, because I think that's such an interesting way to think about what what is so enriching and exciting about Gay Bar, your book. And I love this type of approach, even when when I'm going to be, well, by the time this comes out, I will have given my Whitman's Victorian Queer Reader presentation in San Francisco. But so hopefully when I'm listening back to this, I had such a great time with all the gay bars. But like, I love giving presentations that give that type of collage that's sensory experience of, really evoking the period and not just quoting like not just quoting a theorist and applying that theory. Cause I think that's when like myself too, I start to lose the thread of the person's investment in the topic, because then it becomes very traditional in really making it forcing some theory to work. And
have you read Foucault in Pencil? It's like a very short story by Lydia Davis.
No, I have to.
It's great because she speaks about you. It just reminded me when you spoke about losing the thread. In true to her nature, it's a very short story. I think it's 3 pages, maybe 4. She's in a waiting room, and she is trying to focus on reading Foucault and is having trouble focusing, as far as I remember. Then goes onto the subway, and she realizes that she can break apart when the subject of the sentence is abstract, like the law or power or something like that. By the time that she gets to the end of the sentence, she's lost the thread, as you say. But when he's begun with a kind of like a person, place, or thing, when the subject of the sentence is prisons or schools or, then she's able to follow the sentence through to the end. And I think that there's a kind of a relief. It's like a relatable content, this short story, isn't it? But it's also kind of like a relief, that because it reminds you that if a lot of us are thinking this way and are the way that we're trying to configure the meaningfulness of a given site, in my case, in gay bar, or a series of propositions or whatever, it's really liberating that if you were able to focus around a person, place, or thing, that it seems to be quite widespread, that it's something that a lot of people seem to be able to engage with more readily. So that's been a guiding force for me, and that's why, getting back to a question that you asked earlier, why it's so located, this book, in very particular places. So you won't get a chapter that says this chapter is about racism, or this chapter is about the erasure of promiscuous sexuality. They're more focused on a particular site, and then all those questions rotate around that site.
Yeah, well, and I've been listening to the audiobook version. And first, everyone out there, if you love audio immersive experiences, like everyone knows, I'm a huge, well, first of all, I'm hosting a podcast, but well, there are some podcasters who don't like audio, but I love what you do, because in a way it is an extended, Gay Bar works so well as an extended podcast, Jeremey. And it really feels like you're taking us through, like your voice just really highlights and animates all of these moments. Like you said, like you really bring alive questions around consent, questions around race, questions around women in these spaces, questions around what does it mean to just be LGBTQ plus, like all the different branches. And I think that it's wonderful that you really give us, the reader, the power to question these hard-hitting questions. Sorry, I'm saying question a lot, but to question these hard-hitting moments that you're really not just giving us an answer.
Oh, for sure. And it's been such a expansive experience putting, I mean, I didn't, to be perfectly honest, the paperback book has just come out in the US, and it's been, oh gosh, I guess, when did the hardback came out? In February 2021. So it's a funny thing for me to look back and think, oh my God, I've been like living with the book as a product out in the world longer than I've wrote it at this point in time now. I think I wrote the book very quickly. And so it's been, and this, one of the great joys of that though is that I've been able to, it's taken all these expansive iterations. So in a certain context, I can give a slideshow with video and show you some of the things that are in the book that are only maybe half a sentence in the book. An example would be mention of how gay men in Los Angeles used to go onto Soul Train and take the moves that are like proto voguing moves onto Soul Train, which is primarily known as uh, a showcase of African American music, but it intersects with queerness in a way which I hadn't really considered before. It's like a sentence or so in the book, but then in an interactive lecture, I can show clips from Soul Train and kind of engage with the audience again on both a personal level and kind of pop culture history. And then I did a show for NTS Radio where I combined songs that are in the book with like excerpts from the book, and I'm actually really quite proud of it. I don't think that I say that very often, where I'm proud of something, because I kind of suffer from perfectionism and so on, but I am really pleased with the radio show. And if anything, I kind of a part of me wishes I could go back and do the audiobook after having done the radio show, because when I did the radio show, putting music behind my voice, because I think I'm a very rhythmic writer anyway. I mean, I don't know about you or other writers who are listening, but I read out loud a lot while I'm working. It's a very important part of my practice to figure out the prosody, I suppose, of the language that I'm using. But yeah, it was a great experience to figure out like what it sounds like to have music beneath your rhythm. Slow disco and things like that, and to figure out so yeah, I think it's going to continue. I mean, I've got to write my next book, but the gay bar has been sort of a perpetually giving I don't want to call it the gift that keeps on giving, but whatever, the ball of yarn that seems to just keep getting bigger. I don't know what the analogy is.
Yeah, well, and your next work is going to come from these,
oh, for sure,
this expansive process. Well, and also congratulations on, you said it's the National Book Critics. Wait, no.
Yeah, don't worry. It's the National Book Critics Circle Award. Yeah.
There you go. The National Book Critics Circle Award. Well, congratulations on that. That is a huge achievement.
Yeah.
Also, yes, definitely celebrate the festivities around the paperback coming out in the US, which I've seen you have so many exciting talks that are accompanying that. I've listened to Jeremy's Spotify playlist, which is wonderful for Gay Bar. So yeah, no, this has been wonderful, Jeremey. I can't wait to bring you back on with whatever. I'm not gonna make any conjecture about the next work, because I don't want you to have to think about what's the next site of focus for you.
Oh, no, it's under contract, so that's
okay.
That's fine. I'm contracted to write it, so I'm already kind of almost there. I just have to, as freelance writers do, sort of tie up some projects that smaller scale projects that I'm working on, so that I can kind of clear my mind. But yeah, thank you so much. Of course, I'd love to chat again, and thank you for this opportunity to chat about the book. It's been a while since I've done an interview about Gay Bar, so it's nice to re-engage the world.
Yeah, and are you allowed to tell us what your next book is called? Or
yeah, it's called Deep House, and it's a book that I'm probably still struggling to kind of nail the brief description, but it primarily continues the love story that's at the heart of Gay Bar. And so it's a book about a relationship before and after the advent of gay marriage, a cross-border relationship before the advent of gay marriage. So it kind of examines what kind of gay marriage legitimized and so provided in that way, but maybe in a way not what we're missing, but just what was different, I suppose, before, in terms of formulating kind of, I suppose, non-heteronormative domestic arrangements. But that it's the way that my process works is that I've got a bunch of different places that I want to land, but I'm willing to be open to discovery, because that's just, as I said earlier, that's what keeps me motivated, is to be feeling adventurous.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for it. Please.
Thanks. I don't think I know of another book that's about a relationship before and after gay marriage. So, well, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe I'm sure I'll start figuring out what already exists. But I'm excited to share that story because it's so meaningful to me personally.
Yeah. No, I don't know off the top of my head. Is it an autobiography or is this a novel?
No, it's not a novel. I think
Oh.
that I can sound confusing. It can sound confusing sometimes because when you write narrative nonfiction, which I suppose is one way that you could characterize my work, or creative nonfiction or something like that. So behind the scenes, often the vocabulary is sort of the same as fiction. So like I refer to people in my book as characters. I mean, I have to because they have been details have been changed in order to protect privacy and stuff like that. So it probably sounds like a novel the way that I describe it, but it should be very much in the same spirit.
Well, I'm excited that it's going to continue this
Right.
narrative nonfiction. Yes, that you've laid out. Well, I'm excited for you to come back on. Thank you again, Jeremey. Everyone, please, who's listening, get your hands on Gay Bar. Why We Went Out. Now there's a paperback version.
Cheaper, more affordable.
Yeah, a little cheaper. And also, if you want to hear an extended version of Jeremey speaking, check out the audiobook, which is really, really good. Can't wait to have you back on. And, now I'm so excited to go and put on my Gay Bar eyes for analyzing all the spaces that I'm going to be around this summer. So thank you for that, Jeremey. And we'll have to talk about Fire Island. Okay. Bye to everyone out there. Bye, Jeremey.